Alright, so today we're going to talk a little about EPDM. And so first off, what is EPDM? So EPDM, commonly called rubber, it is a synthetic rubber roofing membrane, primarily made out of ethylene and polypropylene. There are extra ingredients added, but those vary a lot. The base is ethylene and propylene. And so EPDM, primarily a black membrane. There is a white membrane. We'll talk about that later. So EPDM is a black membrane, and it is what is known as a thermoset roof. And so how they work is that the seams are bonded together, essentially adhered using a special adhesive or primer. And so the older method was you would just glue the seams together and then seal the seam. And that kind of worked. There are systems out there that have worked with that method for decades. In fact, to this day, I believe the oldest known EPDM roof, if I recall correctly, is about 54 years old. And that there is quite a big possibility that there might be a couple roofs older than that. That's just the oldest one we're aware of. And so usually nowadays what we use is we use a tape method. And so you would prime one side of the seam, tape, roll it in, and then prime the other side of the seam, and then roll that in, and they bond together really well. And so EPDM is extremely flexible. Reinforced EPDM has a scrim inside of it, which makes it a little bit more resistant to punctures, but takes away a bit of its hail resistance. So it's kind of a catch-22 there. If you live in an area like Colorado or Texas or any of the other states that are getting 2-inch hail regularly, you don't want to go with reinforced as much as you want to go with the standard EPDM membrane. And they come in 45 or 60 mil. Of course, the thinner you go, the less resistant it is to everything. 60 mil is always ideal, but you know, there's a significant cost difference. And so there are roofs that have survived with EPDM. And so the thing about it is that usually when you're talking about a roof's hail resistance, with the majority of roofs, you're talking about the, what's the classification, what's the impact classification. And people talk about how, oh, this shingle might be 2-inch hail resistant. And there's some that can survive 3 inches, although you don't hear about those as much. The thing about it is that in the state of Colorado, they have seen 4-inch and above hail. And EPDM has survived just fine if it was put on correctly. In Texas recently, there is 7-inch hail, and there are still some EPDM roofs that survived it. It being in the 7-inch area, and even for the largest hail ever recorded in the United States, there were EPDM roofs, certain assemblies that survived it. There is really no debate out there. EPDM has the highest hail resistance of any flat roofing material. That's greater than tar and gravel. That's greater than modified bitumen. SPF can fail from bird poop, so they don't even qualify to talk about hail resistance. And so these are going to be your most hail resistant flat roof. Now the downside to EPDM is it's a lot less resistant than to certain things like certain chemicals, thermal expansion and contraction, and it's a lot less resistant to puncture. So if you have a roof, you have a commercial building that has a lot of equipment on the roof that has to be regularly maintained, whether you're a restaurant cleaning your grease spitters, whether you're say for example, an apartment building, you might have a lot of HVAC equipment that has to be regularly maintained. A lot of commercial buildings actually have HVAC equipment on the roof that has to be regularly maintained. And so they can easily drop a screwdriver, drop a hammer, drop a panel from that HVAC, and puncture the roof accidentally. And so that is probably one of the bigger downsides to EPDM, is its puncture resistance. But like I said, the trade-off is that the membranes that are less puncture resistant tend to be more hail resistant. Another positive aspect to EPDM is that it is able to expand and contract more than the majority of roofs. Now, I did say this was also a weak point of it. And so EPDM can expand and contract a lot. It's not uncommon for, especially since EPDM is black, it heats up a lot. So it's going to have a lot more heat causing it to expand. And so when it contracts, it can put a lot of burden on the seams and the walls. So these areas have to be reinforced more. If you want an assembly that lasts 50 years, you don't want to use a small standard seam tape. You want to use a thicker membrane, a 60 mil membrane, because that's going to expand and contract less. And then you want a 6-inch tape to bond them together. Or you want to use half sheets. And this will extend the life of the roof. Now, the flip side of that is that most roofs can't expand and contract for an extended period of time. Now, I'm talking after decades. They will eventually start to rip and tear. And the same thing will always happen to EPDM no matter how you do it, is that eventually EPDM will either pull out from the walls, which you can stop simply by reinforcing the walls with an enhanced plating pattern and assembling it correctly. Alternatively, it will tear the seams in the field. And so after about 20 years, you want to check all your seams in the field. Any ones that are starting to fail, look like they're starting to pull apart, you can reinforce. And what you can do after 30 years, some brands recommend it, some don't, is you can place a couple relief cuts here and there, then plate both sides of that cut, and then put new seams on it. And what you'll find is when you put these relief cuts, say you're just going down the field of the roof, you cut right along the seam, as soon as those relax, you will notice that they pull apart about an inch. Sometimes more, depending on the size of the sheet used. If you use 10-foot sheets, it's going to be closer to an inch. If you use 20-foot wide sheets, boy, I've seen those pull apart almost 3 inches after a relief cut. And so that's why using the shorter sheets helps a lot. It helps reduce the amount of strain on it. And now if you use a fully adhered roof, the downside is eventually that adhesive can start to fail. So there's a lot of debate out there between what's better in this case. Once you're at 30 years, the adhesives or the mechanical attached systems. The truth is it really just depends on how well it was put on and what adhesives you used, as well as what plating system you used. Now with EPDM, however, so why is EPDM not the top roof? It's got the longest lifespan of almost any modern roofing material. Well, the thing about EPDM is being black, it's going to build up a lot of heat inside. Now, of course, if you live in, say, the northern climates or in the mountains, that might actually be a good thing. But once you get enough insulation, you go to a lot of places where they have R30, R38 nowadays. Once you hit about R38, R40, it doesn't matter if the roof is white or black. It's not going to get much of any heat inside. And another drawback to EPDM is every one of the details is pretty much done by hand. It all has to be primed correctly, cleaned correctly, rolled in correctly. If it's stretched, you have to know how to stretch it correctly. And there's a lot of details with EPDM that anybody without any experience or knowledge could get right long enough to get paid and get out. There are ways to do EPDM. If you're trying to get over 20 years, you double reinforce your corners. If you're trying to get over 30 years, you're going to reinforce your wall. You're going to use 2 layers of corners. And so there's a lot of little details that go into how long you want this roof to last. And the thing about it is that everything on your roof is a detail that could go wrong. Every single seam, if the tape is out too far, or if the tape's too far in. Every drain, every pipe, every little detail. And you're reliant on contractors that think that anybody can do it. Because like I said, anybody, even a homeowner going up on their own roof, could probably figure out an EPDM roof well enough to get it past a few months, possibly even a year or two, simply by using primer and pushing the materials into place. To do it properly takes skill. It's an art form. And that art form is being lost because EPDM doesn't control the market share that it used to. And so the biggest issue with EPDM is finding a contractor that actually understands what they're doing. With EPDM, more than almost any other material, you have to vet your contractors properly, because a contractor making a mistake on a flat roof can cause a flood inside. It can damage hundreds of thousands of dollars in equipment if you're in a tech firm or a medical building. And I've seen EPDM roofs fail after a year, where the entire roof has to be replaced because the person who put it on was just that incompetent. And so I do highly recommend EPDM. Now, there is a thing called white EPDM. Now, EPDM is naturally black because of what it's made of. White EPDM usually has some sort of surface coating on top of it. White EPDM is less flexible than black EPDM. White EPDM is a lot thicker when it comes to doing details in order to maintain that white color. And I will admit, testing it back and forth, white EPDM doesn't have the bonding strength of black EPDM. And so overall, white EPDM, unfortunately, has been redone so many times over the years, it's hard to accurately say how well it lasts or how good it's going to perform long term. What we can say right now is that white EPDM is much newer than black EPDM. It's even newer than TPO. And we don't have enough real-world data or even testing that would imply that it's any better than black EPDM. In fact, it's in almost every scenario, it seems like it's worse. So that's our talk today on EPDM. If you have any questions, please feel free to post them in the comments. I check the comments every 2 days, and I respond to as many as I can.